Have you ever noticed how the people who achieve extraordinary things aren't always the smartest, the most talented, or the luckiest? They're often the ones who are hardest on themselves. Now, I don't mean the kind of self-criticism that destroys confidence. I'm talking about the kind that builds character. Because being hard on yourself isn't a punishment. It's a gift. It's the voice inside you that refuses to settle for mediocrity. It's the standard you set when no one's watching. It's the part of you that says, I can do better, not because the world demands it, but because you expect it of yourself. But here's the irony. In a world obsessed with comfort, praise, and instant results, we've begun to see self-accountability as something negative. We confuse being kind to ourselves with never challenging ourselves. And that's dangerous. Because growth doesn't come from ease, it comes from friction. So today, I want to redefine what it means to be hard on yourself. Because when done right, it's not self-sabotage, it's self-respect. And it might just be the most powerful tool you have to unlock your true potential. Being hard on yourself isn't about tearing yourself down or feeding that inner critic that says you're not enough. It's about committing to growth even when it's uncomfortable. There's a difference between self-criticism and self-accountability. The first weakens you, the second builds you. When you're hard on yourself in the right way, you're not punishing yourself for failing. You're pushing yourself to learn. You're not questioning your worth. You're questioning your limits. That's what growth demands. It demands that you look at where you are and ask, honestly, is this the best I can do? Most people avoid that question because it's hard to face the gap between who we are and who we could be. It's easier to hide behind excuses, to blame circumstances, or to settle for good enough. But progress begins the moment you stop lying to yourself. When you stop saying, I'm doing my best, and instead ask, how can I do better? That shift in mindset changes everything. Because being hard on yourself, when done with purpose, isn't about guilt. It's about responsibility. It's about recognizing that you're the driver of your own growth. No one else can do the work for you. Think about the people you admire, the leaders, artists, athletes, innovators who changed the world in some way. They didn't get there by being comfortable with average. They held themselves to a higher standard. They woke up earlier, practiced longer, studied harder, and stayed humble enough to keep improving. They didn't wait for someone to tell them they could do better. They told themselves that. They saw potential as an obligation, not a compliment. That's the essence of being hard on yourself. Refusing to accept your current version as your final form. Being hard on yourself also means being brutally honest. Not in a cruel or destructive way, but in a way that keeps you grounded in truth. It means admitting when you've fallen short, not to feel ashamed, but to understand what needs to change. Self-honesty is rare because it hurts. It forces you to confront your weaknesses, your habits, your patterns. But without that confrontation, growth is impossible. You can't improve something you won't acknowledge. And that's why the people who grow the most are often those who hold the mirror up to themselves most often. They're not afraid of what they'll see because they know facing the truth is the first step to transformation. There's also a quiet dignity in demanding more from yourself. It's a kind of respect for your time, your abilities, and your potential. When you hold yourself accountable, you're saying, my life matters enough to do it right. You're not waiting for someone else to set the bar. You set it yourself. You don't need applause to feel accomplished because you know when you've given your best. That internal standard becomes your compass. It keeps you moving even when no one's watching, even when no one's cheering. That's what separates the people who achieve lasting success from those who only chase validation. But there's a trap. Many people misunderstand what it means to be hard on themselves. They think it's about perfection, about never making mistakes, never resting, never being satisfied. But that's not strength, that's insecurity. True self-discipline isn't about punishing yourself for every flaw. It's about challenging yourself to rise above comfort, to do what you said you'd do even when it's hard. It's about setting standards that make you proud, not miserable. The difference lies in intention. If your intention is to prove your worth, you'll end up exhausted. But if your intention is to grow, you'll end up stronger. Being hard on yourself also teaches humility. Because when you hold yourself to a high standard, you start to see how much you still have to learn. You realize growth is a lifelong process, not a destination. You begin to appreciate the journey more than the reward. That humility keeps you grounded. It keeps you curious. It keeps you teachable. And that's what allows you to evolve, again and again. The most successful people aren't those who think they've arrived. They're the ones who stay hungry, who stay open, who never stop asking, what can I improve? And when you're hard on yourself in the right way, you also develop resilience. Because you stop expecting the world to go easy on you. You understand that setbacks are part of the process, not signs to quit. You stop being shocked when things don't work out the first time. You simply adjust, learn, and try again. That's what strong people do. They turn frustration into fuel. They use disappointment as data. They grow through what they go through. Being hard on yourself trains you to see failure not as a reflection of your identity, but as feedback for your improvement. It's not about being harsh. It's about being honest enough to demand the best version of yourself. It's holding yourself to a promise that you won't waste your potential, that you won't let comfort rob you of excellence, that you'll keep going, even when it's easier to give up. When you live with that kind of integrity, something changes inside you. You begin to trust yourself more. You start to respect your own word. You realize that every time you push through difficulty, you're building strength you didn't know you had. That's the quiet reward of being hard on yourself. It turns discipline into dignity and effort into meaning. Because the truth is, greatness doesn't come from being told what to do. It comes from deciding who you want to be and then demanding it from yourself every single day. When you do that, when you commit to growth, even when it's uncomfortable, you stop living like a passenger and start living like a creator. You stop waiting for motivation and start building momentum. And that's where transformation begins. Not in comfort, not in praise, but in the moments when you hold yourself accountable to the future you know you're capable of creating. High standards build self-respect, not self-doubt. When you set high expectations for yourself, it's not because you think you're failing. It's because you believe you can be better. That belief is an act of self-respect. It means you see potential within yourself worth developing. You don't set high standards because you want to prove something to others. You do it because you owe it to yourself to live up to what you're capable of. The standards you hold for yourself become the boundaries that define your integrity. They say to the world, this is who I am, and this is what I stand for. When people think of high standards, they often think of pressure or perfectionism. But the truth is, high standards are a form of love. They protect you from mediocrity. They keep you from settling for less than you deserve, not just in your work, but in your habits, your relationships, your character. When you expect more of yourself, you become more careful with your choices. You become more intentional with your time. You start caring about the quality of your actions because you understand that every decision is a reflection of who you are. High standards are not about arrogance. They are about self-awareness. They remind you that your life is too valuable to be lived carelessly. The problem is that society often confuses confidence with comfort. We're told to go easy on ourselves, not to be too hard, or accept ourselves as we are. But self-acceptance without self-respect is just complacency in disguise. You can accept yourself and still demand more from yourself. In fact, the people who truly respect themselves are the ones who refuse to stay the same. They don't wait for life to improve. They improve themselves to meet life. They know that confidence doesn't come from telling yourself you're perfect. It comes from keeping promises to yourself, from doing the hard things you said you would do. Every time you live up to your standards, you reinforce your trust in yourself. And that trust becomes the foundation of your confidence. High standards also act as a filter. They help you attract the right people and opportunities into your life. When you respect yourself enough to maintain your standards, you stop settling for toxic environments or shallow validation. You start surrounding yourself with people who challenge you, not those who enable your comfort. The energy you give out changes because you're no longer chasing approval. You're living by principle. And people can sense that. They can sense when someone operates from conviction rather than convenience. That's why leaders with high standards earn loyalty. Not because they demand perfection from others, but because they model excellence themselves. There's a quiet strength in holding yourself to a higher level, even when no one notices. It's the kind of integrity that doesn't need recognition. You don't follow the crowd because you have your own compass. You don't cut corners because you respect your own work too much to cheapen it. You take pride in the effort, even when the results take time. That's the beauty of high standards. They shift your focus from outcomes to character. You start to care less about how things look and more about how they feel. You realize that doing the right thing matters more than doing the easy thing. But high standards are not meant to be rigid rules that make life heavy. They're meant to be guiding principles that bring clarity and purpose. When you hold yourself to a high standard, you don't become stricter, you become freer. Because now you know what you stand for. You don't get lost in confusion or compromise. You make choices aligned with your values. You stop chasing temporary satisfaction because you're working towards something meaningful. High standards give your life direction. They remind you that you're building something bigger than comfort. You're building character. There's a deep satisfaction that comes from meeting your own expectations. Not the world's, not society's, your own. When you finish a day knowing you gave it your best, even if no one noticed, that's self-respect. When you make a decision that honors your principles, even when it costs you something, that's self-respect. It's not about pride, it's about peace. The peace that comes from knowing you didn't betray yourself for convenience or approval. And that kind of peace can't be given to you. It has to be earned through consistency, discipline, and courage. At the same time, having high standards doesn't mean being harsh when you fall short. It means being honest. It means saying, I didn't meet my standard today, but I will try again tomorrow. It's understanding that self-respect isn't built in perfection, it's built in persistence. Every time you choose to realign yourself with your principles after a failure, you strengthen your foundation. You prove to yourself that your values aren't conditional, they're commitments. That's the kind of standard that endures through success and failure alike. People with high standards live differently because they think differently. They measure success not by comparison, but by growth. They don't ask, am I better than others? They ask, am I better than I was yesterday? That's where self-respect grows, in quiet, consistent effort. They don't seek shortcuts because they know real fulfillment doesn't come from ease. It comes from effort that means something. High standards give their lives depth, structure, and meaning. They remind them that the goal isn't to impress, it's to improve. And when you build your life around those standards, something powerful happens inside you. You begin to walk taller, not because you think you're superior, but because you know you're honest. You trust yourself to follow through. You speak with conviction because your words are backed by action. That alignment between who you are and what you do creates a kind of strength that no one can give or take away. High standards aren't there to make life harder. They're there to make you stronger. Because the person who respects their own effort, who honors their own word, who refuses to settle, that person doesn't need validation. They already have something far greater. The quiet confidence that comes from knowing they are living in integrity with who they're meant to be. Discomfort is the birthplace of discipline. Nothing meaningful in life is ever born from comfort. Comfort is the space where growth stops, where curiosity fades, and where potential begins to rust. The people who achieve mastery in any field are not the ones who always enjoy what they do. They are the ones who have learned to sit with discomfort long enough to turn it into strength. Discipline is not natural, it's cultivated, and the soil it grows in is discomfort. Every time you choose to do something hard, something you don't want to do, but know you need to, you are building the muscle of discipline. You're teaching yourself that feelings don't control your actions. Principles do. We live in a world that glorifies instant gratification. We want success without the struggle, progress without patience, and rewards without resilience. But life doesn't work that way. Everything valuable takes time, and time tests discipline. Discomfort is that test. It asks, how badly do you want it? It challenges you to push through boredom, fatigue, and frustration, to keep showing up even when motivation disappears. The difference between people who wish and people who achieve is not talent. It's tolerance. The ability to tolerate discomfort determines how far you'll go. Because the truth is, greatness feels uncomfortable. Growth feels uncomfortable. Even honesty feels uncomfortable. But all of them are necessary if you want to evolve. Discipline isn't glamorous. It's not about feeling inspired every day. It's about waking up early when you want to sleep in. It's about saying no to distractions when no one's watching. It's about doing what's right when no one will give you credit. It's built in small, quiet moments where you make choices that most people won't make. Discomfort is the teacher that shapes those moments. It reminds you that convenience and growth cannot coexist. Every time you embrace a challenge, you're proving to yourself that you can endure more than you thought you could. And with each test, your confidence grows. You start to trust yourself, not because everything is easy, but because you've seen yourself persist through what was hard. Discomfort also strips away illusion. When you step outside your comfort zone, you see who you really are, not who you pretend to be. You learn what triggers your fear, what limits your patience, what weakens your focus. And those lessons are invaluable. Because awareness is the foundation of discipline, you can't improve what you don't understand. Discomfort forces reflection. It makes you question your habits, your excuses, your patterns. It pushes you to ask, why am I resisting this? And what am I afraid of losing? In those questions you find clarity. And once you gain clarity, discipline becomes not just about doing more, but about doing better. Many people mistake comfort for happiness. They think avoiding struggle will lead to peace. But comfort without purpose creates emptiness. You start to feel restless, even if everything around you looks fine. That's because humans are designed to grow. We're wired to pursue, to challenge, to overcome. The moment we stop stretching ourselves, we begin to feel lost. Discomfort reminds us we're alive. It's the spark that keeps us moving forward. When you run from discomfort, you're not protecting yourself. You're limiting yourself. Every challenge avoided becomes a potential unexplored. Every easy path taken is a skill left undeveloped. The most disciplined people are not the ones who enjoy difficulty. They're the ones who've learned to see it differently. They don't view discomfort as an obstacle. They see it as an invitation. Every moment of discomfort carries a lesson, and every lesson carries an opportunity to grow stronger. That's how discipline forms. One small victory at a time, one uncomfortable moment endured, one temptation resisted. You don't build discipline by reading about it or wishing for it. You build it by doing the hard thing, again and again, until it becomes who you are. Discomfort also reveals priorities. When things get hard, excuses surface. Suddenly, you discover what matters to you and what doesn't. If something truly matters, you'll find a way. If it doesn't, you'll find an excuse. That awareness can be uncomfortable too, but it's necessary. It forces you to confront what you actually value. And once you align your actions with your values, discipline becomes easier. It stops feeling like a punishment and starts feeling like purpose. You realize that the pain of effort is far smaller than the pain of regret. Discomfort becomes a guide, pointing you toward the areas that need growth, the weaknesses that need strength, the fears that need courage. The paradox of discipline is that it feels restrictive, but leads to freedom. When you build the discipline to stay consistent, you gain control over your life. You stop being ruled by impulses. You stop being a slave to comfort. Discomfort gives you that control. It teaches you to act based on intention, not emotion. The person who can endure discomfort can achieve anything because they're no longer limited by how they feel in the moment. They act according to what they believe, not what they want. And that consistency compounds. It builds habits. It builds results, and most importantly, it builds identity. You start to see yourself as someone who follows through, someone who doesn't quit, someone who can be trusted, not just by others, but by yourself. Discomfort also humbles you. It reminds you that growth doesn't happen overnight. It takes repetition, patience, and humility to keep showing up when progress is invisible. That's where real discipline is forged. Not in the days you win, but in the days you endure. It's easy to stay consistent when results are visible. It's harder when they're not. But that's when it matters most. Every time you persist through silence, you're training your mind to rely on purpose, not praise. You're building a discipline that doesn't depend on external validation. That's the kind of strength that lasts. The kind that stays with you through failure, rejection, and doubt. When you begin to see discomfort as the birthplace of discipline, your entire perspective changes. You stop seeking the easiest path and start seeking the meaningful one. You stop asking, how can I avoid pain? And start asking, what can I learn from it? You realize that the moments that test you the most are the ones shaping you into someone stronger, wiser, and more capable. Discomfort stops being something you fear. It becomes something you respect. Because you understand that every time you face it, you're not just building endurance, you're building identity. The kind of identity that says, I can handle it, I can adapt, I can grow. And that is the foundation of every great achievement, every strong character, and every disciplined life ever built. True kindness to yourself means demanding your best. The world often tells us that being kind to ourselves means taking it easy, avoiding stress, or lowering our expectations. But that version of kindness is incomplete. Real kindness isn't about making life easier. It's about making yourself stronger. It's about caring enough to hold yourself accountable to your potential. When you demand your best, you're not being cruel to yourself. You're showing yourself the respect you deserve. You're acknowledging that your time, your abilities, and your purpose are worth more than mediocrity. Most people misunderstand self-kindness. They think it means comfort, indulgence, or self-forgiveness without reflection. But genuine kindness is about honesty. It's about saying, I can do better, and meaning it. When you demand your best, you don't let yourself off the hook too easily. You don't justify laziness or make excuses for inconsistency. You hold yourself to the same standards you admire in others. Because you understand that every act of self-discipline is an act of self-respect. Every time you choose progress over comfort, you're proving that you believe in your own potential. When you demand your best, you start to treat yourself as someone whose future matters. You no longer allow temporary emotions to dictate permanent outcomes. You stop doing what feels good now and start doing what feels right later. That's what kindness really is, caring about your future self as much as your present one. Most people treat their future selves like strangers. They make decisions that bring short-term pleasure, but long-term regret. True kindness reverses that pattern. It asks, what will benefit me tomorrow? Instead of, what feels easy today? It's a shift from comfort to commitment. Demanding your best also builds trust. When you consistently follow through on what you say you'll do, you begin to believe in yourself at a deeper level. You stop doubting your ability to change because you've seen yourself do hard things before. That's the foundation of self-confidence. It's not built from affirmations or positive talk. It's built from evidence. And the only way to gather that evidence is by showing up, even when you don't feel like it. When you treat yourself kindly enough to demand excellence, you create a track record of reliability. You become someone you can depend on. But there's a fine line between being demanding and being destructive. True kindness doesn't mean expecting perfection. It means expecting effort. It's not about pushing yourself to exhaustion. It's about pushing yourself to integrity. When you demand your best, you don't measure success by results alone. You measure it by honesty. Did you give what you could give today? Did you do the things you said you'd do? Did you move forward even a little? That's what matters. Because progress, not perfection, is what defines growth. The kindness lies in persistence, not punishment. Being kind to yourself by demanding your best also means taking responsibility. You stop blaming others, circumstances, or luck for your outcomes. You accept that your life is the result of your choices, and your choices are the reflection of your standards. That level of ownership can be uncomfortable at first, but it's liberating, because once you take responsibility, you realize you're in control. You can change. You can adapt. You can improve. That's the kind of empowerment that comes from real kindness, the kind that makes you accountable to your own potential. It's easy to confuse self-care with self-indulgence. The world tells us to be gentle with ourselves, but sometimes gentleness is an excuse to avoid effort. There's nothing wrong with rest. Rest is necessary, but rest without purpose turns into avoidance. True self-care is doing what will make you proud tomorrow, not just what feels good today. Sometimes, being kind to yourself means setting boundaries, saying no, staying disciplined, and doing the hard thing because you know it's right. It's not soft. It's strong. It's not indulgent. It's intentional. When you demand your best, you also raise your standards for everything around you. You stop accepting half-hearted effort from yourself, and that naturally changes how you see the world. You begin to value quality over quantity, purpose over pleasure, meaning over convenience. You stop tolerating what drains your energy and start protecting what fuels your growth. That shift in mindset changes everything, from how you work, to how you love, to how you lead. Because the way you treat yourself sets the tone for how others will treat you. If you hold yourself accountable, others will too. The real act of self-kindness is to challenge yourself in the service of your potential. It's about holding a mirror up and asking, am I giving my best? Or just enough to get by? That question can be uncomfortable, but it's also the beginning of transformation. Because when you start demanding your best, you begin to uncover strengths you didn't know you had. You discover how capable, resilient, and creative you truly are. Growth never happens by accident. It's always a result of intentional effort. And the most powerful form of kindness is believing you're worth that effort. Demanding your best also changes your relationship with failure. You stop seeing mistakes as proof that you're not good enough, and start seeing them as proof that you're trying. You understand that failure is not a verdict. It's feedback. And that feedback becomes fuel for improvement. That's what self-kindness looks like in action. You don't tear yourself down when you fall short. You learn. You adjust. You grow. You hold yourself accountable not because you hate where you are, but because you love where you could be. That mindset turns struggle into strength and pressure into purpose. True kindness to yourself is not about lowering expectations. It's about raising commitment. It's about caring enough to do what's hard, to show up when you'd rather quit, and to keep believing in your own potential even when no one else sees it. It's about living each day with the awareness that you owe it to yourself to give your best. Not for recognition, but for fulfillment. When you live that way, you no longer need to chase motivation. You become it. You embody the balance between compassion and courage, the kind of kindness that doesn't make you weaker, but wiser, tougher, and more alive. Accountability is the highest form of self-love. It means you care enough about yourself to take responsibility for your actions, your choices, and your outcomes. Most people think self-love is about comfort, but real self-love is about growth. It's about being honest enough to admit when you've fallen short and brave enough to do something about it. Accountability is not about guilt or shame. It's about ownership. It's the recognition that your life is in your hands and no one else is coming to save you. When you hold yourself accountable, you stop making excuses because you understand that excuses might protect your ego, but they destroy your progress. Being accountable doesn't mean being perfect. It means being aware. It's the ability to pause and reflect, to look at your own behavior and say, I could have done better. That level of awareness requires humility. It's not easy to look at yourself honestly without flinching. But that's where growth begins. In the quiet moments when you choose truth over comfort, accountability is self-respect in motion. It says, I'm worthy of doing better. It's not about punishing yourself for mistakes. It's about learning from them. Every time you take responsibility for something, instead of running from it, you're proving to yourself that you're strong enough to handle the truth. When you truly love yourself, you don't want to live in denial. You don't want to keep repeating the same patterns that hold you back. You want to evolve. Accountability is how you do that. It's the bridge between intention and improvement. You can read all the books, make all the plans, and dream all the dreams, but without accountability, nothing changes. Because dreams don't work unless you do. And working on yourself requires discipline. Accountability turns self-love from a feeling into a practice. It transforms love from words into action. It's easy to say, I love myself, but much harder to prove it through consistent effort and responsibility. The most successful people in life all share one thing: they take ownership. They don't waste energy blaming others, circumstances, or luck. They look inward first. They ask, what could I have done differently? That mindset doesn't just create success, it builds character. Because accountability strengthens your integrity. It makes your word mean something. When you tell yourself you'll do something, and then follow through, you're reinforcing trust with yourself. That trust is priceless. It's the foundation of confidence, consistency, and self-respect. Without it, everything else crumbles. There's a misconception that being accountable makes life heavier, that it adds pressure. But the opposite is true. Accountability brings freedom. When you stop blaming and start owning, you stop feeling powerless. You realize that you have the ability to change your direction, to rewrite your story. It's empowering to know that your choices matter, that your actions have meaning, that your life is not happening to you, it's responding to you. This kind of awareness gives you control, and with control comes peace. Because once you accept that you are responsible for your life, you no longer waste time waiting for someone else to fix it. Accountability also deepens your relationships with others and with yourself. When you're accountable, you communicate with honesty. You admit mistakes without defensiveness. You apologize without pride. You learn to listen, not just to respond, but to understand. That honesty builds trust. People begin to respect you, not because you're perfect, but because you're real. The same is true internally. When you hold yourself accountable, you start to trust yourself more. You know that you'll be honest even when it's uncomfortable. You stop hiding from your truth. You stop betraying yourself for the sake of convenience or ego. That's what makes accountability a form of love. It's the decision to stay loyal to your growth, even when it's painful. Accountability requires courage. It's much easier to point fingers than to look in the mirror. It's easier to say, they hurt me, than to ask, what did I allow? It's easier to blame the system, the timing, or the people around you than to accept that sometimes you were the obstacle. But real courage lies in that acceptance. Because the moment you take ownership, you gain power. You can't change what you don't claim. Accountability gives you the ability to change. It's the starting point for transformation. It's the moment you stop being a victim of your circumstances and start becoming the author of your life. When you live with accountability, you develop consistency. You don't rely on motivation, you rely on discipline. You stop making decisions based on feelings and start making them based on values. Even when no one's watching, you do what's right because you've learned that your self-worth isn't measured by how others see you. It's measured by how honest you are with yourself. That honesty becomes a daily practice. It shows up in the way you work, the way you speak, the way you show up for your goals. It's not glamorous, but it's powerful. Because over time, accountability compounds. Each honest moment builds on the last until integrity becomes your identity. Accountability is also a form of forgiveness. It allows you to move on without resentment because you've faced what needed to be faced. You don't carry guilt around because you've already made peace with your responsibility. You understand that taking ownership doesn't mean hating yourself for your mistakes. It means learning from them so you don't repeat them. That's how self-love grows deeper. You start to see your flaws not as permanent failures, but as lessons that shaped your strength. You stop expecting perfection from yourself and start valuing progress. True accountability doesn't come from fear of punishment. It comes from love for your potential. It's choosing to tell yourself the truth, even when it hurts, because you deserve honesty. It's holding yourself to a standard, not out of ego, but out of respect. It's saying, I want to be better, not because I have to, but because I can. That's self-love at its purest. The kind that doesn't just comfort you, but challenges you. The kind that doesn't just make you feel good, but makes you grow. Accountability might not always feel kind, but it is, because there's no greater act of love than taking full responsibility for your own becoming.